And we'll give a heads up that Nolan is taping the presentation.
Yeah, so I'm taping it. I'll shut it off once everybody else talks, but I like to get just
like Oklahoma's does.
yeah. Okay. Mark. Alright. My presentation is going to be on the Islamic State, unlike the previous two people. It is not an internship, so it's a bit of a different there. But sort of the classic way of approaching terrorism is by, do I have my props? Yeah, I have my props. Sort of the classic way is by shooting a huge bullet at them from a fighter jet from above. People always ask why I wear the combat boots, and it's not because this is my first resort or that's the one I want to go to. It's that I have friends in the military. The boots are actually a fundraiser for something called the Boot Campaign, and proceeds go to wounded veterans. And it sort of reminds me that what I say here about counterterrorism policy has effects because we have to put people in harm's way. So it's, rectifying the situation over there without, having casualties on either side. So it's not that, I am overtly militaristic, even though it's the persona I sometimes portray for a certain effect, but it actually does have sort of rationale behind it. So just on procedural notes, because this can be a very delicate topic, I wanted to look at sort of the Islamic State and why they've sort of taken the Levant by storm, and why they're sort of why they're the main group to emerge out of the Syrian conflict. So some major sort of procedural notes that need to be noted is that there's so many names for this organization. ISIL, ISIS, IS is what they like to go by, or DAESH. They're variations of sort of Arabic acronyms. The commentary from my research reflects Islamic State's views. It's not sort of Islamic views. I've written an entire paper on actual, Islamic theology, and then theology and other extremist ideologies, but it's from, it's from their perspective. It's not the perspective. And then sort of Arabic names are just very simple. And then again, my statements here, and just because it can be a delicate topic. So to sort of talk about the Islamic State, you have to understand it. And my research shows that because they are operating in sort of a power vacuum as well as a black hole in the world, and this was as of April 2015 when I conducted the initial research, that the fighting force was anywhere from 10,000 to 50,000. 10,000 is what I believe the CIA was, that was immigration stats from different countries as well as what Syria thought. 50,000 is what the CIA was saying realistically by security analysts. They were saying about 21 to 30,000. Major sort of issue with ISIS is that foreigners from outside of the Levant, and that's, from Israel all the way over to sort of the midst of Saudi Arabia, incorporating major parts of Jordan, Turkey, Iraq, and Lebanon. So the Levant is 12,000 to 17,500 that are outside of that region. And then Western fighters coming from the global north actually make up a huge portion, 2,000 to 3,500, which estimates now say has actually more than doubled. 100 from the US, 600 from the UK, almost 1,000 from France, 300 from Germany, 40 from Canada, 1,000 from Russia. That's mostly those sort of the Caucasus and the Urals. So you have a very sort of diverse tapestry, and you also have some from South America as well. But you have a very diverse tapestry, and I wanted to understand what is drawing this sort of vast swath of, military-aged fighting males to this conflict, so we can better understand. So the myths of extremism is that it's poor, ignorant Muslims, right? It's a common American trope. That's what I'm sort of trying to combat, is that it's not, the 72 virgins, right? Or that it's Islam, the 1.5, 6, 7, 8 billion people in the world. It's not that religion commanding it or compelling it, to wage war against all infidels, or also the notion that if the West was not so mean, extremists would not harm the outsiders, right? That if only we were nicer, that might help, but it can also be somewhat fatalist. So we have to keep, these in mind, whether it goes against our beliefs or with it. So some of the cited factors from the U.S. security perspective are from the director of the CIA, John Brennan, as well as U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, and they actually tend to grasp the issue quite well. That's one thing about the Obama administration and the liberal policies is they actually have sort of grasped the idea. So it's just not the ideology, but it's the tactics, right? It's this new age. It's the power of the modern communications that play a new role. ISIL is specified specifically, and then John Kerry says that the Islamic State recruits are among the disaffected and disenfranchised. But then also, they're on a misguided quest for meaning and empowerment, and the Islamic State employs or exploits anger, ignorance, and grievance. So, by understanding that candidate pool, we can first of all understand why the Islamic State is so good at recruiting from that sort of potential pool. Then we can also say, how can we, get to them before they get to the battlefield, or how can we engage them before it's with a fighter jet? How can we get it before it goes to that stage, right? So there are some social factors in play. The recent economic slumps in Western countries have further marginalized already isolated foreign demographics, right? There are 10 cookies, the banker takes 9 and tells everybody else, hey, the immigrant's going to take the last cookie. It's that sort of mentality that is isolating these, necessarily non-native groups, but that's also generating a recruiting pool. And that's something that people don't necessarily think of in these economic slumps, right? They're looking for theirs, and they don't really understand the implications. Just as well as institutionalized racism and discrimination, especially with the resurgence of right-wing political movements in Europe and with Donald Trump now in the US. So you're seeing Western mobilization because they come to the Western countries maybe for new life, new promise, but then they're being treated as criminals or something that they're not, and that is sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy and something we need to learn to avoid. And then it's also appealing to adventure and purpose, right? You're in a foreign place, you know how much family, the locals are treating you bad, or at least you're perceiving that, and you want that. But also, fresh recruits also attempt to leave, because once they get there, they're like, man, being in the desert where it's 40 degrees Celsius for y'all, but they're they're basically executed when they do try to escape. So there are some factors that are appealing to them, but once they get there, they aren't liking that. So some other factors is that they're appealing to the macho persona of fighting in firearms. I can tell you, it's very seductive. Monetary compensation, that's another thing. Obama recently said, death to America is great on the streets, but it's not going to create jobs. Well, the Islamic State offers employment. You can send money back to the family and actually, be that, idealized young male providing for the family, given, your little stipend. Also, the idea of brotherhood and purpose, right? Whether it's Boy Scouts from a young age, or all the way up to military, sports teams, fraternities, that's something that appeals. And then another paper I wrote, the Islamic State has sort of been an unintentional research topic. I actually wanted to study sort of the security landscape in the former Yugoslavia when I started the program, but this sort of took over. So another paper I wrote is how soft power alone has failed to destroy or degrade. And destroy or degrade is a specific term used by the US government, which is sort of leading the coalition of the willing, as it were. Soft power, it hasn't really done much in recruiting. And that's another thing, is appealing to the macho persona and the outreach, and this is what the paper was oriented towards, is that the Islamic State uses the US military's recruiting tactics, right? You're a young male, fight for your state, right? Whether it's the United States or the Islamic State, they have been very purposeful, and we'll see that later. So, social media, they've taken it over by storm. The sort of image everybody has of the previous iterations of Islamic extremism, as it were, is bin Laden sitting there monotone, giving his speeches and diatribes. Well, as we've seen with Islamic State, I'm not sure if you've seen the videos for this paper. I actually reviewed every single one that had been out. Had problems sleeping for about 3 weeks. That was not good. I actually removed the video portions from this because I still can't watch it. So at the time, there were roughly 46,000 Twitter accounts operated by Islamic State supporters. Anonymous is actually grouped up to take that down. That has actually had ill effects, and I'll discuss that here in a little bit. And then, so 500 to 2,000 Twitter accounts are responsible for the vast majority of social media activity. That's posting whenever a new video comes out, whenever a new report comes out, linking to stuff. English is actually one in five, while 75% of everything is Arabic, and this is actually a study done by J.M. Berger. He's actually done a ton of research, and luckily I was able to sort of piggyback off of that into the context of the U.S. military. So yeah, one of the things was when you tweet, it says location, right? So if I were to send a tweet right now, it would say, Nolan's giving a presentation at Grable, right? And it would give it geographic coordinates. U.S. military love this because that ISIS fighter who's holding up the AK and being like, I'm on the battlefield, well, they would position those strikes, look at the buildings next to it, go, hey, that looks like a Humvee outside, let's hit that with a bomb. So they really tamped down on that, and when Anonymous shut down all these accounts, it actually removed a lot of what the U.S. Was aiming for and targeting. So it actually has unintended consequences, even though that outreach mechanism has been brought down. So the Islamic State, does it have an official social media policy? They do. The level of activity coordination effort put into the videos, graphics. I do some video editing. I do media stuff like that. And the stuff I see in the Islamic State videos is people that have probably had real-world experience, real-world classes, and it rivals some of the U.S. military's recruiting. Like one of the famous U.S. military recruiting things was, if someone wrote a book about your life, would people want to read it, right? And it's appealing to that adventure, that masculinity, and that's something that the Islamic State has really adopted. So, from going to this sort of, idea of a cave-dwelling terrorist, we're actually moving towards the guy in front of his computer popping out the latest video on iMovie or something. So you have that front, but it's also that this new generation of fighters know how to use social media, right? They know how to edit video, right? We're all on Facebook, and that's sort of, or at least the millennial generation is on that social media, and we know how to use it. So we have seen a hybrid instance of that. So yeah, they've done very good quality of their videos. Again, military age males, and it's feeding a perception of meaning, fantasy, and then it's also that they get the accuracy by volume in a sense, but then also it's somewhat of a coherent theology. So the avenues for peace. We've seen that the audience can be reached and targeted by social media, right? They are responding, at least the foreign fighters are, to this sort of call to join your Islamic State, right? Come be a mujtahid and fight with us. So if we can understand that target demographic of the sort of military age fighting males, you can get to them before they want to go to the battlefield. So that's where I wanted to draw those parallels. The U.S. military is an all-volunteer fighting force, right? So you have to volunteer. Same with Islamic State in terms of recruiting foreign fighters. Local populations are held hostage, and there are some there is forced slavery within the cities, and amongst the fighters it's hard to do, right? Because you don't want someone that you're holding captive to have a weapon. But in terms of recruiting foreign fighters, you see a ton of similarities, and I go into this further in the research, is that they almost copy and pasted the U.S. military's recruiting, whether it's through social media, through motifs, themes, through editing, through targeting certain demographics, or addressing a recruiting pool. They match that, and they've actually been able to recruit massive amounts of foreign fighters, and that's the issue. We haven't seen this mobilization since the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, and that's what is drawing so much attention. Is it's not that it's anything there's no sort of single thing that is very revolutionary per se. It's just it's so coherent, and that it is so very much like an established fighting force or an established military. So that appeal is what's getting to these disenfranchised youths, and it's trying to get to them before they go on the battlefield. So you don't have to resort to that, and you can offer, community initiatives to welcome them into the community, to break down those, sort of ethnic barriers. And yeah, so that's sort of where the research went, and I think that's time. Bibliography and then questions.
Thank you, Nolan.